Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code ONEFREEPP for a free single card today.
Dan Illman and Mike for Kentucky Derby Prep Recap. We're going to take a look back at the Southwest Stakes at Oaklawn Park. Triple-digit Beyer speed figure earned over a sloppy track by a long shot. We break from the gate. Keep an eye on the number 10, Mystic Dan. They find the rail. This is a great ride.
Yeah, good stuff here by Brian Hernandez into this first turn. Dan just going to definitely work his way over. He's going to eventually get to the inside before they hit the first turn, and he's going to do it by, I think this is a key point to this race too, he's going to get in front of Liberal Arts here, who otherwise a major contender would have had a perfect trip in here.
That's a very good point. We'll talk more about Liberal Arts because he's rallies well for third. Meanwhile, up front, the two Asmussen train runners, Otto the Conqueror and Carbone, they're sparring for the lead. In behind is Winstock, who just doesn't seem to be handling the track very well.
Maybe it was that, maybe he just didn't really want to be chasing a horse who had, been using his speed out in California in his races. Dan, whatever the excuse was for Winstock, he doesn't look happy here. He is not going to factor in this race, and he's going to finish last in this race. The two Asmussen horses just sort of spar up front. This pace is solid, Dan. I don't think it's blazing, and these two horses are going to get pretty tired through the stretch.
Park 3 wide off the leaders is Wayne Lucas's Just Steel, a very consistent horse who's going to make a strong bid for the lead right here. He's going to get to the front. He's going to run a solid, albeit non-threatening second. All in all, it was another good performance, but Mystic Dan is just cruising in behind, waiting for a seam.
Just always traveled in this race, did Mystic Dan. He worked his way to a perfect spot around the turn. He's going to come right through on the inside here. He's going to put in a really strong finish and just give Just Steel no chance to stick with him here. Just Steel ran fine in here, Dan. He doesn't have a strong finish in his own right, but he's clear second best. Just no chance with this winner powering away.
Liberal Arts is going to rally for third, make it relatively close for second, but Mystic Dan, trips and rides don't get better in Triple Crown prep races than this, just right up the rail at 11-1, and the Beyer speed figure earned 101 is eye-catching, so now he's earned a 96 Beyer speed figure, that in his second lifetime start going 5.5. He's earned a 101 Beyer speed figure, albeit with a perfect trip over a wet track going 1 mile and a 16th, and it looks like Kenny McPeak's just going to run him in the Arkansas Derby.
You take the next step on the Derby trail with him and see if he can replicate this performance, Dan. You're right. He has one other fast race. His only other win in his career going 5.5. The other stakes try for him in the Smarty Jones did not go that well. It wasn't a terrible performance, though. Really liked the wet track here. Got a great trip in this race, but he was also 100 the best.
Just Steel broke from an outside post, chased outside, was no match for Mystic Dan. I still think the question coming into this race with Just Steel was, is he going to be as effective going 2 turns as he is maybe as a tweener, 7 furlong mile and a 16th around 1? And I think that question still remains to be answered. We'll probably find out more in the Rebel.
Yeah, I guess so, Dan. I really don't know where I stand on him. I kind of feel like the longer distances don't really suit him quite as well as the sprints do. He did run fine in here, and I don't want to be too hard on him for not being able to go with Mystic Dan through the stretch, but he really wasn't finishing that strong when he just saved second.
Liberal Arts ran well to be third. Heck, it was his first start of the year. We hadn't seen him since October. He caught a wet track. He maybe didn't get the position he could have had if Mystic Dan didn't drop in front of him into the backstretch. But I like that he ran on at least at the end of this race. I think it shows that there is some promise.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that you would look at Liberal Arts and say, well, he's, in the top echelon of this 3-year-old crop right now, but he's pretty good. He's run nothing but good races, and he ran fine in here. It's hard to say how much it would have made a difference had Mystic Dan not been able to drop in front of him. He had to swing out for the stretch. He ran on at the end, but there was no point in this race where it looked like Liberal Arts was going to win.
Otto the Conqueror, Carbone, they were going up front, and as you mentioned, it was an honest pace. Carbone looked like he was the first to give way at about the 5/16. He was hard-ridden. I think it was a little bit of a disappointing performance from him stepping up off an impressive allowance victory. Otto the Conqueror was coming off a little bit of a layoff, but this was kind of his class test. Maybe the wet track is an excuse for both.
Maybe that's fair enough way to look at it. They both have to prove that they want, longer distances, say beyond a mile, Dan. Out of the Conqueror, I don't know. He ran fine in here, but he just was no match when they came for him. I thought Carbone was the bigger disappointment in this race. He's kept up close on the outside. He could not get by around the second turn. He got very tired in the stretch.
Can you project improvement from Awesome Road, the fourth place finisher trained by Brad Cox? He broke from the far outside post, raced wide throughout in his first start of the year. He never threatened for the top 3 honors, but for a first start back over a wet track and a wide trip, maybe there's something more there.
I mean, he's one of those horses who it's becoming more and more difficult now, Dan, because he's got one good race. He hasn't really been that competitive since, but 2 starts back now in the Kentucky Jockey Club. He did not get a good trip in that race. And I just sort of felt like maybe he ran better than it looks. And maybe you want to say the same thing about this one, Dan. Could never get over, wide all the way. His rider had to take a hold of him and take him back. Then he just sort of plugged on. He didn't run great, but he didn't have a good trip.
Let's take a closer look at Mystic Dan. He's a homebred son of Golden Sense. Brian Hernandez Jr. aboard for Kenny McPeak. You look at this pedigree, there's not a ton of black type in here, but this horse, it looks like, can step a little bit. Again, we mentioned the 96 buyer going 5.5. This was such an improvement, though, over the Smarty Jones, a race in which he chased and tired. You have to wonder a little bit. Trip aided, certainly. Wet track aided. I wonder if he was a big wet track move up.
Yeah, I think it's fair to wonder that, Dan. He's going to go into his next start at very likely a much shorter price than he was in this race, and he's still going to have something to prove in there. He looked good winning this race, but he's a horse who does have something to prove the next time we see him.
I'm taking a look at prices, and the prices were there in the Southwest. Mystic Dan, $24.80 to win. Just Steele, Wayne Lucas on the Triple Crown Trail for now with this guy, $9.60 to place. Liberal Arts, late running for third, paid $4.20. It was 10, 11, and 6 with Mystic Dan earning a 101 buyer over a wet track in the Southwest. It's on to the Arkansas Derby.